and really in the threshold here, solid threshold, and yeah, I'm really excited to be able to stage the readings when I'm here in this veranda, this porch, this stoa, this threshold. The threshold has really taken on a pretty powerful, has become powerful, right, as a trope, right, which is more than a concept, but not simply something that's a being. So it's a topos, if you will, trope or topos. So this is actually, I started on February the 13th. Today's March the 13th, I believe. Is it not? I'm losing track of time. And yes, it is. It's my sister's birthday. I'll have to send her a happy birthday later. And it was a month ago, on February the 13th, that I got underway. So exactly 1 month, depending on how you count it. I'll count it on every 13th day of the month will be exactly a month. So I wanted to go back and read the epigram for the experiment, which is interesting. It did not appear, or does not appear, as the epigram to Being and Learning. Being and Learning's epigram is actually a quotation from Nietzsche. But this one is from Bonaventure, from The Soul's Journey into God, from 1259, the Common Era. Bonaventure was a Franciscan. He was a philosopher and a theologian. He also wrote the Life of Francis, but it was an important read for me when I was an undergraduate at Fordham. One of the most formative courses I took was with Ewart Cousins, and I think I've mentioned Ewart Cousins in these meditations, and he really was the one who introduced me to interreligious dialogue, to the notion of ecumenical approach to religion, and the concept of spirituality. I think he was the first one who introduced me to the idea in a rigorous way. But also, I took classes with him in which we read Dante, as well as some of the great literature of medieval and early medieval, late antiquity, and early medieval and medieval. So in his course, that's where I first read Plotinus, who was an important figure for me, and I think we read Augustine, must have, and then we read some Bonaventure. Right. So anyway, the quotation is as follows, is the epigram from Bonaventure. I ask you then to weigh the writer's intention rather than his work, the meaning of his words rather than his uncultivated style, truth rather than beauty, the exercise of affection rather than erudition of the intellect. To do this, you should not run rapidly over the development of these considerations, but should mull them over slowly, with the greatest care. Here ends the prologue. So, I'm going to read this on the 13th day of every month, and I see there's going to be some human atmosphere in the background. People from the balcony. Yeah, so I'm going to read this every day on the 13th, and the first time I read it, I didn't pick up and didn't have the impression I do today. I mean, reading it today, I definitely are picking up a couple things. One is his distinction between intention and work. He says, weigh the writer's intention rather than his work. I don't know if I would make that distinction. I think that the work, as I understand it, is the expression or the realization of the intention, the meaning of his words rather than his uncultivated style. I think both, and not to dwell too long on so-called meaning of words, because the whole project is about the excess, right? That language always is revealing the excess of being insofar as it gives us something to think about. And his the uncultivated style, it's cultivated, it's uncultivated, it's messy, it's experimental. That's part of it, and that's important. Truth rather than beauty. Again, I think I would probably emphasize in that distinction, the way he's thinking about it, beauty, And in fact, we might even flip it around or just collapse the two. The exercise of affection rather than the erudition of the intellect. There I'm with him, because I think erudition is overrated. And I think that it's motivated by a feeling and a love for the work, love of wisdom in the best sense. And so, I'm sorry, it's hard to not be distracted by people shouting from the balcony. You should not run rapidly over the development of these considerations, but should mull over them slowly. That for sure. That may be, when I was talking about the pace of the writing and the pace of the work, I think for sure that this is key here. And I would not at all contest that point and would fully embrace that. So there ends the prologue, there ends the rereading of the epigram, and so back to the daily meditation. Today is the 29th one, and so still talking about Socrates. Again, this writing ultimately became chapter 2 in Being and Learning on Socrates, and we're still exploring his the symposium, Socrates' appearance in the symposium, Plato's dialogue, the symposium. Yesterday I talked about the preliminary part of it, and I talked about the symposium as offering us up a demonstration of what Arendt calls philosophy as a practice that emerges through friendship, through the conversations that friends have. And I focused a lot on the beginning of the symposium where we're shown that it's a recollection of a recollection. So I'm going to pick it up then, and I think at this point now we're in the symposium, in the celebration, in the feast. The dinner wasn't more than halfway through when Socrates enters the scene, much to Agathon's relief, who bids Socrates come sit next to him. Quote, I want to share this great thought that struck. I want you to share this great. I'm going to start over again. Socrates enters in and Agathon says, I want you to share this great thought that's just struck you in the porch next door. I'm sure you must have mastered it, or you'd still be standing there. That's Symposium 175c. Says Agathon to Socrates. Agathon, although a good friend of Socrates, has not yet come to recognize the location that Socrates has arrived from is not a sphere where the truth reveals itself. He suspects Socrates has come some clear, distinct idea that he will now share with his friends. For why else would he have taken so long to join them? Of course, it is the case that Socrates has something to share with them, and his offering will in the end come across in an unusually didactic or doctrinaire form. But sensing the opportunity to remind his host and the company that he has arrived as Socrates, despite his uncharacteristically fine attire and shoes, perplexed in a state of wonder, which he is eager to share with them. My dear Agathon, Socrates replied, as he took his seat beside him, I only wish that wisdom were the kind of thing one could share by sitting next to someone. If it floated, for instance, from the one that was full to the one that was empty, like water in two cups finding its level through a piece of worsted. If that were how it worked, I'm sure I'd congratulate myself on sitting next to you, for you'd soon have me brimming over with the most exquisite kind of wisdom. My own understanding is a shadowy thing at best, as equivocal as a dream. But yours, Agathon, glitters and dilates. As which of us can forget that saw you the other day, resplendent in your youth, visibly kindled before the eyes of more than 30,000 of your fellow Greeks. That's the Symposium 175d3. Agathon's response to Socrates' compliment is to measure it both as a friendly jibe at the champion's success in the theater of Dionysius, and as an invitation to take up a dialogue on the matter of wisdom, specifically how it comes to us, how it appears, and whether or not it is a matter that can indeed be so easily shared between friends. Socrates has reminded Agathon and his guests, and Plato his readers, that Socrates has arrived from a shadowy location, where, quite alone, he has endured the appearance of the surreal. Estranged, he emerges as if from a dream, not certain of what has appeared to him. Equivocal, peculiar, shadowy, this is the hide-and-seek of being, which disrupted Socrates' direct path to Agathon's house and forced him off the road, pulled him back, away from the glitter that shines on us in everyday life. Agathon was right to recognize that Socrates had been struck by something, but off the mark when describing this as a great thought. On the contrary, Socrates had been struck dumb, and as a result enters the party emptied, not full of the kind of wisdom that can be poured into the cups of his friends. Yet as we see, it turns out that Socrates is quite full of wonder and memory, questions persisting throughout his lifelong encounter with this tide that has been catching, pulling, and throwing him off the well-beaten paths. All of these moments at the beginning of the dialogue prepare us for the famous recollection of Socrates' offers at the party, when he gives his turn, and his turn arrives to give his account of love. As the dinner gets into full swing, the guests who had on the previous evening celebrated Agathon's victory concur that they are still much soaked and would prefer to spend a very pleasant evening in discussion, as Amachus puts it. He adds, I suppose the best way would be for each in turn from left to right to address the company and speak to the best of his ability to praise love. Socrates notes that all have made unanimous consent to the suggestion and says, moreover, that, speaking for myself, I couldn't well dissent when I claim that love is the one thing in the world I understand. Symposium 177 D3. For those who have listened to Plato's account of the legend of Socrates' mission, his wandering and wonder that was characterized by his mantra, all I know is I know nothing at all, we are struck by the affirmative statement made by Socrates here at Agathon's banquet. Socrates says he actually knows something. Indeed, this is evocative, and it situates us in a position to receive more. By the time it is his turn to speak, we have grown impatient and anxious to hear, finally, what he has to say on the matter, the one and only phenomena he has seen clearly in this world, love. And that's where it ends. So, that, I felt pretty good about that text that I wrote, and I know that at this point in the writing and the experiments, I had sort of drifted off a bit and was kind of focused on now taking up Socrates and developing the ideas that then, prior to the writing, the first month became chapter 1, where I sort of laid out the language and sort of talked about the fundamentals, the questions, and laid out the gesture, the form, if you will, of the improvisational, phenomenological, poetic meditation. And so I can see that and hear and feel in the writing that there's a measured sort of now slow movement through Socrates, who I had to begin with if I was going to focus on figures. I'm also struck by the taking up of the symposium and the exploration or the introduction of this notion that there was, this line for me is so significant, that Socrates says that, speaking for myself, I couldn't well dissent when I claim that love is the one thing in the world I understand. Now, of course, there are these distinctions, and I thought about this morning as I was walking back from the downtown. and I saw a sign that said agape, which is Greek, and I think it's, you know, it's meant to denote the love of God, or the love that sweeps us into the divine love. And that's usually part of a trio of words, one of them being eros, which is sort of the earthly love, but that's really reducing it in a way that's it's not necessarily accurate. But eros, you know, the root of the word erotic, and philia, which is usually meant to describe the love between friends. So the love of wisdom, that is philosophia, is the love of philia, and it's a sort of one way of thinking about Arendt's point that philosophy, the intimacy that it brings out between friends, is one that is the intimacy that comes out from friendship. So philia, she's sort of saying, you know, if we think of love of wisdom and look at the word philia as its root, then it's a kind of love between friends. So you have eros, philia, and agape. The symposium moves in and out of these different terms, and Socrates moves in and out of them. But ultimately, the love of which he's speaking of, when he says he knows this, would be a love that is the love that is the nexus between these three. Because there's an erotic dimension, there's a dimension of friendship, and then there's a dimension of the divine, that are all sort of coming together in philosophy, in the activity of thinking. So when Socrates says it's something that I know of, he's saying it's something that I've experienced. I think this is key. So we'll hear more about that in the upcoming meditation. But I want to go back to the beginning, because I think it was important that this quotation, the citation from the symposium was introduced. I really like this, and I think it's so important. You know, that Agathon greets Socrates by saying, again, the porch. And all these years later, I you know, made much of the threshold recently, the last couple of years, and it sort of faded from my own memory that, you know, these quotations from the symposium. Of course, now I'll never forget them. Agathon says, share with me, please. Sit down and share with me what it is that struck you, because I'm sure you sort of mastered the concept and have a clear understanding. And Socrates is saying, it doesn't work that way, Agathon. I was drawn into this place that's quite dark. Plato's brilliant in staging this, right? And having him literally pull off and into a dark sort of what he calls shadowy space. And he says his own understanding, and he's talking about his own understanding, his modality of Socrates the thinker, is a shadowy thing at best, as equivocal as a dream. As equivocal as a dream. So this is very important. But what then is interesting is to take that sense of having a shadowy understanding, one as equivocal as a dream, and then pairing that with this confidence that he has with regard to love. Where does this confidence come from? Where does the confidence of Socrates' understanding about love come from? Well, I don't know where I'm going to go with this, because I haven't read ahead. I suspect, though, that something I might say, and something I would say now, is that it comes from the certainty of the experience. The understanding one has of the experience, what does it mean, where is it coming from, it's the equivalent of where does being hide, and the actual embodied feeling that one has from the experience, that it comes on to you unexpectedly, you know, jolting us from, you know, the movement that we're used to in our lives, from point A to B to C to D, you know, how we move through the day. When we get thrown off that trajectory, that already causes us, as I've already talked about, throws us what I call into wandering, because wondering about it makes us start to wander in a different place. But the experience of that, the visceral experience with being thrown off like this, is one that leads us to be uncertain or to feel unclear. So even though Socrates is saying that he has a certain amount of confidence to speak about it, he has a confidence that what he experienced was real. So here then I think that the term I would want to use is not certainty, but it's the confidence of the reality. He's sure that what he's experienced is something that's quite real. In the way that we know that we've had a dream, we can't account for the dream. We have no idea where dreams come from. We can't explain dreams. We merely describe them. But we're describing something that we are 100% confident that we've experienced. And that's where I think Socrates is, the distinction is important and it's made here between the certainty one has about an idea and the confidence one has about the reality of an experience. Okay. With the bells chiming in the background, I'm going to leave it at that.